Well, if you joined us today a little bit early, at about 10:15, and you've been keeping track, we are now at 6 different versions of the 23rd Psalm this morning. There were 4 before the service started, one of which was even in Hebrew, by the way, Adonai Roeh Lo Echsar. We had one from the COVID choir, which was created within the last 2 weeks. And we just sang one that comes from the Scottish Psalter from the 17th century. Don't worry, there's another one yet to come still if you're not too tired of the same text over and over again. It's interesting, that we haven't even, that's not even the tip of the edge of the lake in which there might be an iceberg, in which there is all of the settings of Psalm 23 that there are. There's tons of settings for choirs, there's solo versions, there's different variations in translation, there's different languages, there are so many different versions. It is truly one of the most familiar and yet reinterpreted, if you like, whether it's musically or in word or in art, passages of Scripture from the Bible. In fact, I'll tell you, it is probably my favorite passage from the Bible. It's certainly my go-to passage from the Bible. I have lots of favorite passages for different reasons, of course. In fact, I can pretty much say I like most of it. I'm just going to, by the way, tell you that snorting is not Lori off camera. The boys have decided that they're going to fight over the sheep that flew. Even they are really into the sheep today. But we know this psalm so well. We know this psalm so well. Even if you don't know the Bible at all, even if you've never been to church, you'd recognize the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You've heard it somewhere. It's the go-to passage if you're watching a movie and there's a scene where there's sadly a funeral, that's what you're going to hear. At some point, the priest or the minister or the pastor is going to say, the Lord is my shepherd. It's the go-to passage. I wish it weren't the go-to passage for funerals, because it isn't about death. It's about life. And I think that's why it endures. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want for anything. And then it goes on to talks about how God is there when the pastures are green and it's all good. We're lying down next to lovely flowing rivers, not crazy lakes where storms come up and there's huge waves that are throwing us everywhere. Because, we're not all in the same boat, but we're certainly in the same storm. Just saying. It goes on to talk about how God is with us when things are good, when things are even like we're in the valley of the shadow of death. God is with us when our enemies are in front of us. God is with us when our table is full of a great feast and our cup overflows. God anoints us, blesses us with so much. In fact, we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Why? Well, because surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Why? Well, because God is my shepherd, I will lack for nothing. That's what this psalm's about. I think that's why we love it so much, is because it is truly about how God is present in our lives no matter what. And when we are with God, we lack for nothing. We're going to talk in a minute about how we interpret that, nothing. But still, I think that's why it's so familiar to us, because it's about God being in our lives always, no matter what. In fact, I think truly Jesus is channeling. I'm going to challenge it in a second. I'm thinking ahead. But Jesus channels that psalm when he talks in John about being the good shepherd. He says, I'm the good shepherd. I'm the gate for the sheepfold. The sheep know my voice. And at the very end of that passage that we heard this morning, this is why I'm here, says Jesus, that all may have life abundantly. We throw that word abundance around a lot, by the way, in church. We use it a lot, usually because we're trying to remind people what it actually means to know abundance. It means to lack for nothing. I shall not be in want. When we are with God, when we are aware that God is in our lives, we lack for nothing. Not maybe all of the things we desire, but the things that we need. And maybe that's how we need to understand that difference. We may not have all of the things that we desire for this life, but with God we have love. We have grace, we have comfort, we have strength of spirit, we have inspiration, we have the life-giving creativity that began all this. That's what God is about. And when we understand that God is my shepherd, I lack for nothing, I shall not be in want, I have all that I need. However you translate that, we understand it as love and grace and comfort. All of those things are in us. All of those things are with us. We share them with each other. We must share them with each other. This is a moment maybe though where we want to just spend a little time wondering about how we understand the shepherd and the sheep. Because it's really easy to say, well, that's not really a particularly relevant metaphor anymore, is it? I mean, I don't know any shepherds. I know some sheep farmers. I'm pretty sure that they probably wouldn't call themselves a shepherd. I'm even more certain that they don't spend all their time out in a field with a rod and a staff, or sleep out under the stars guarding the gate of the sheepfold on a regular basis. They might need to do it now and then, but I'm pretty sure they don't do it on a regular basis. The point is that we don't shepherd the way we did several thousand years ago, or even a few hundred years ago. And we've come to, especially in contemporary society, we've come to understand sheep as being kind of a negative metaphor, because sheep don't think for themselves, they just follow the leader. They're not very smart. They're all the same and they herd together. Except they're not all the same. They're all different. And maybe they do like to herd together, and maybe they do like to follow. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, first of all. Secondly, we still find the 23rd Psalm meaningful. We still find the image of the Good Shepherd meaningful. If we didn't find the image of the Good Shepherd meaningful, first of all, we wouldn't be using that psalm all the time, I don't think. And secondly, there wouldn't be so many churches called Church of the Good Shepherd, or stained glass windows of Jesus holding sheep. It's still meaningful. Why? Well, I think it's still meaningful because we've learned it to be meaningful. As a community of faith, as a church, as a people, we've learned the meaning of the Good Shepherd. It's Jesus. We've learned the meaning of the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want, because God is always with me, no matter what happens. God's love is always there. The content of the psalm, the meaning of the psalm, has become the meaning of the shepherd. We talk about it all the time. We teach it all the time. We learn about it all the time as a community of faith. So as a community, we've learned an understanding. And that's awesome. That's great, because it's part of who we are as a community. We've learned in community. But we're not all sitting in the room here today. We're each where we are. And I wonder if that maybe isn't a great opportunity to wonder how we personally, not as a community, but we personally know God. Maybe you're good with that shepherd image. That's absolutely, as a personal image, that's your image. But maybe you imagine God might be like a gardener. It's spring, or a farmer. Maybe you might imagine that God is like the coach or the captain of the team. Maybe you might imagine that God is very much like a caregiver, a doctor or a nurse, someone who helps to care for the people that need care right now. Maybe God is like someone who provides one of those essential services. Can't live without it. Exactly. Maybe right now, as individuals, we might see God in different ways. A teacher. Because right now, teachers aren't just teaching, they're engaging. They're doing so much more. I've always liked the language of companion, mentor, friend when talking about God. Because I like the personal part of that. That's not to say a shepherd can't be personal. That can be a very personal image. But right now, where we're at right now, let's just take a moment or two and think about how we might engage and connect with God as an individual, how we personally know God. We know God in many ways as a community. The thing is, there are as many ways to know God as there are people. There are as many ways to God as there are people, because each of us is unique and has our own experience of God. We have our community experience. We have our individual experience. A parent, a teacher, a friend, a mentor, a gardener, a farmer. There's thousands. There's more than thousands. Because each of us will know God how we know God. How do you know God?